the flickering light of Asia, or the Assyrian nation and church. The pledges of the Georgian Republic had been made in good faith to the Assyrians, but those pledges were destined to remain merely as proofs of good wish, good intention, and mutual interest in a common cause. Surer than the occupation of any territory in Persia, Turkey had relied on the possession at least a part, if not the whole, of Caucasia, which teemed with millions of sympathizing Tartars. The government of the new republic, therefore, was pressed entirely too hard by the enemy to have rendered the least assistance to an ally removed by several hundred miles from its capital. Armenia had been invaded, and Georgia was exposed to a peril equally great. If there was any assistance for which the Assyrians could hope, that might be rendered by the Armenian element that had already fled from Van into Salmas and Urmia, or by an Armenian force under the general Andranik, which would surely be driven by the invading armies of the Turks, and then, in order to avoid its certain capture by the enemy, would enter into northern Persia. This did actually take place, for the news of Andronek's approach had moved the Muslims of Khoi to hasten the massacre of the Christians there, before they could be rescued by the Armenian general. But the Armenians of Van, who had fled to Urmia, instead of assisting the Assyrians to form a junction with the army of Andronek, practically saved the Turkish army in Persia from being totally crushed, as it will presently be seen. Aga Petros, having apparently cleared his rear from the menace of the enemy, marched to Salamas, where the Turks had arrived, and there to engage them in battle. The Turkish army at this time was gradually falling into a trap skillfully laid by the Assyrian general. Andronek would appear in the rear and on the left of the enemy, while Aga Petros would face the Turks in the front and on the right. For 6 days the battle raged in Salamas, the Turks using heavy pieces of their artillery. The unavoidably slow progress of Andronek compelled the Assyrian general to divide his army into 4 sections, each under one commanding general. 2 of these sections were laced immediately in front of the enemy. One section moved across the encircling hills to strike from the right of the Turks, while Aga Petros himself undertook a flanking movement to come against the enemy in the rear. The Turks detected this move and made the position of Aga Petros the objective of their concentrated fire. The Turkish right was forced to retreat with the loss of some prisoners and 1 cannon. The Assyrian center took the hill of Mari Yohanan and remained entrenched there, awaiting developments and further orders. At this crucial moment, when the surrounding of the Turkish army was a question of hours, the Armenian population of Salamas very mysteriously started to desert their homes and flee south towards Urmia. The Armenians of this district had heretofore been rendering most valuable assistance, but this stampede of their people became, for the time being, simply incomprehensible. In the meanwhile, Aga Petros had called for the additional troops in order to cap the climax and complete the victory. But instead of receiving the desired reinforcements, he received the astonishing news of the exodus of the Armenians from Salamas. The Armenians who had fled from Van had done so against the will of Andronek, their general. They had been ordered by the latter to hold the city and await Armenian reinforcements under his own personal command, which were moving with great speed. Andronek, on finding the Armenian city deserted by its defenders, was forced to retreat, and was in turn pursued by the Turks. The officers of Van refugees dreaded the news of their general's arrival. They knew they would be shot, hence they falsely circulated the report that the coming of their general with 5,000 men was untrue. They even bribed the 2 messengers set by Andronek with the news of his approach to Khoi to change their story and discredit their previous information. Terrible as the effect of this treacherous deal on the part of these Armenians upon the people was, it did not the least discourage the Assyrian general, for he had planned to surround and smash the Turks prior to the arrival of Andronek with his men. But in the midst of this commotion, which took place on the verge of a great victory, further astonishing news came from Urmia, informing the Assyrian commanders of the reappearance of large forces of the Turks in the vicinity of that place. The Assyrians, suspecting the possibility of a flank movement by the enemy from the direction of Gavur and Targavur, and weighing the trophies of the decisive victory in Salamas, with the dangers of an invasion in Urmia, decided to retreat and make the hills that surrounded the large plateau of Urmia as the challenge ground for the 2 hostile armies.